Sometimes the moment begins so quietly that you almost miss the shift. You are talking with someone you care about, maybe your partner, maybe a family member, maybe someone at work. The conversation feels normal at first, just another small discussion in an ordinary day. Then something changes. Their tone sharpens. Their voice gets louder. The words start coming faster. You never listen. You always do this. Maybe you should just leave me alone. And in that moment, your body reacts. Before your mind has time to understand what is happening, your heart starts beating faster. Your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. You feel a wave of pressure moving through your body. You know you want to say something back. You know you should explain yourself. You know you should defend yourself. There are so many thoughts racing through your mind. But suddenly, something strange happens. Your mind goes quiet. The words disappear. You stand there listening while they keep talking. Maybe you nod. Maybe you say something small like, "Okay," or "I'm sorry." Not because you agree, not because you believe you were wrong, but because in that moment, the tension feels bigger than your voice. Then the argument ends. Maybe the room gets quiet again. Maybe the conversation moves on. Maybe both of you pretend the moment is over. But later, something unexpected happens. Hours later, while you are driving, while you are in the shower, while you are lying in bed trying to sleep, suddenly, the perfect words appear in your mind. The explanation you should have said. The response that would have made everything clear. The calm sentence that would have defended you without starting a bigger fight. And you find yourself asking the same question millions of people quietly ask themselves. Why didn't I say that when it mattered? If you have ever experienced this moment, you are not strange, and you are definitely not alone. In fact, what you experienced has a name. Psychologists call it the freeze response, the third survival response. Your body runs before your brain even catches up. Most people know about fight or flight. When danger appears, the body either prepares to confront the threat or escape from it. But there is a third response that many people do not realize exists. Freeze. When your brain senses emotional danger, especially during conflict, your nervous system sometimes decides that staying still is the safest option. Your body pauses. Your thoughts slow down. Your words disappear. It happens so quickly that your conscious mind barely has time to understand what is going on. This is not weakness. It is biology. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment for signals of safety or danger. Loud voices, angry expressions, harsh words. All of these signals can activate the same survival system your ancestors used when facing physical threats. Even though you are not in physical danger, your nervous system reacts as if the situation could become emotionally dangerous. Your heart rate increases, stress hormones rise. Your brain focuses on reducing the threat. And sometimes the fastest way to reduce the threat is silence. In that moment, your brain is not thinking about winning the argument. It is thinking about stabilizing the situation. If staying quiet keeps the conflict from getting worse, your nervous system sees that as success. But the real reason this reaction feels so confusing is because the response often started long before the current argument. Most survival patterns begin much earlier in life. Think about what conflict looked like when you were younger. Maybe someone in your life raised their voice often. Maybe arguments at home felt intense. Maybe you watched adults lose control of their emotions. When a child experiences repeated moments of tension like that, the brain begins to study the environment carefully. Children learn quickly what makes situations calm down and what makes them explode. If speaking up made things worse, but staying quiet helped the moment pass faster, your brain quietly saved that information. Silence keeps the peace. Children are not consciously analyzing these patterns, but their nervous systems are learning constantly. Over time, that lesson becomes automatic. So years later, when someone raises their voice at you in adulthood, your nervous system activates the same protective pattern. Your body reacts instantly, heart racing, mind slowing, words disappearing. Not because you are weak, because your brain believes it is protecting you. But here is where things become complicated. What once helped you survive emotional tension can begin to hurt you later in life. When this pattern repeats again and again, something frustrating starts to happen. You begin carrying words you never spoke. You replay conversations in your head. You imagine the arguments differently. You think about what you should have said. The brain does this for a reason. When the danger is gone and your nervous system finally relaxes, your thinking ability returns. That is why the perfect responses appear later. Your mind is finally calm enough to process what happened, and your brain tries to finish the conversation it could not complete earlier. But the deeper problem is not the argument itself. The deeper problem is what silence slowly teaches other people. When you stay quiet, every time someone raises their voice, they may start believing that their behavior is acceptable, not because they are cruel, not because they want to hurt you, but because the moment never shows them the impact of their words. This is where the freeze response becomes painful. Your nervous system is trying to keep the relationship stable, but at the same time, you are quietly absorbing emotional damage. That is why so many people describe this experience as confusing. You care about the person. You want peace. You do not want to hurt them, but at the same time, you feel hurt yourself. The goal is not to become aggressive. The goal is not to start shouting back. The goal is something much more powerful: learning how to stay calm while still speaking. Most people imagine that standing up for themselves requires a dramatic speech. They imagine strong arguments and perfect explanations. In reality, the most effective responses are usually small, honest sentences. Simple words that communicate how the moment feels. That hurt. Please don't talk to me like that. I want to solve this, not fight. Sentences like these do something important. They allow your nervous system to stay calm while still protecting your voice. Over time, this slowly teaches your brain a new lesson. Conflict does not always mean danger. Your brain begins to understand that you can remain present in a tense moment without disappearing. And the other person begins to see something important as well. That your silence was never weakness. It was restraint. Healthy relationships are not built on one person swallowing pain to keep the peace. Real connection grows when both people can speak honestly, without fear. If someone truly values the relationship, they will learn to hear you. And if they do not, silence would never have protected the relationship anyway. So if you ever find yourself in that quiet moment during an argument, when your heart is racing and your mind feels blank, remember this: your body is running a survival program that once helped you feel safe. But safety does not have to mean losing your voice forever. Sometimes growth begins with one small sentence, spoken calmly in the middle of tension. And if this moment we talked about today feels familiar to you, write the word calm in the comments, because the moment many people think they are weak is often the moment their nervous system is simply trying to keep peace. And understanding that pattern is the first step toward changing it.